readily we have 80,000 panchayats where this type of need has been felt. Against this sustainable development goals mapping, ministries which have been mapped by our ministry, they include rural development, land resources, drinking water and sanitation, agriculture and farmers.
Mr. Vijay,
yes, sir.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sir.
What I requested is, let us talk of some specifics. What you are trying to say here is Sankalp and other mandates. Just hear me out. All people are sitting. If you can come out with some specifics, if it is there further in your slides,
sir, now I
please
am coming,
focus.
Sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Sir,
yeah.
Here starts the specifics. The ministries which have been mapped are these. From here, my actual PPT starts. That was previously I was about background. Rural development, land resources, the functions of these ministries which are panchayat oriented, these functions have to be mapped. The functions have to be taken into account while making plan for rehabilitation and mitigation. Drinking water and sanitation, they have very good scheme. Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Animal Husbandry, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Suppose power disruption, they have very good solution. Environment Ministry, a skill development ministry, a skill requirement may be there. Remote sensing agency, NRSA, NIC, GIS, these are institutions from where help can be obtained in planning, mitigation and rehabilitation. These are the schemes which have been mapped for convergence. Convergence of natural resources ecosystem. And here I would put my focus on last 3 points regarding funds. Central and State Finance Commission Fund. Central Finance Commission makes grants to panchayats. These grants are in 2 shapes. One is for tied and another is for untied. Tied grants focuses on drinking water, sanitation and ODF. And untied grant focuses on locally felt need. These are huge funds and these can be mapped for rehabilitation and mitigation. Again, ministry runs one scheme that is called RGSA, Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. This scheme helps in capacity building of elected representatives and panchayat functionaries. NABARD can be mapped for providing loan to people. This is the power given to panchayats through Disaster Management Act. Section 41 of the Act gives very limited power to panchayats, and this power mainly is in respect of training, for giving power to projects, for making buildings and carrying out relief and rehabilitation. The panchayats have to function within those areas, but they are not limited to this. They can go beyond that.
Vijay ji, 2 minutes bache.
Sir, my PPT is over, sir. Now you see there are 3 columns: pre-disaster, post-disaster, during disaster. For pre-disaster planning, Finance Commission Fund can be used, and for post-disaster, Finance Commission funds can be used. Here, fund can be taken not only for Finance Commission Fund, which is for disaster management, this fund which is for panchayats. From here, fund can be obtained for these activities. This is the capacity building framework. On left side, we can key aspects of capacity building. These are the themes of capacity building, and now these are the training institutes where capacity building of panchayat functionaries can be done. This is the framework for preparation of disaster management plan. And these are the actions Gram Panchayats can take, these are actions block Panchayats can take, and these are the actions which can district Panchayats. When they are Panchayats, there are 3 layers of Panchayats: Gram Panchayat level, block Panchayat level, and district Panchayat level. They have funds, they have manpower, they have institutional support, and these can be mapped in mitigation and rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayji.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, they can ask you. My request to you is, if you can prepare a small write-up on what are the convergence schemes available under the Panchayati Raj Department and share it with NDMA. We would, share it with states specifically that these are the convergence schemes. We will also be aware when we are appraising the projects, when we are receiving from states, so we can tell them that this is available under a particular scheme. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions from anyone?
No, I mean, not a question, but as I mentioned, as I mentioned in the morning, I think Panchayati Raj institutions will be in the driving seat because all the actions has to happen at the local level. So the Gram Panchayats have to plan it and implement it, and that we have tried to include it in the policy. If there is any kind of weakness in the articulation, we will try to improve that. But we recognize the role of Gram Panchayats in implementing the entire policy.
Okay, sir. Actually, since Gram Panchayats have to implement through, first they have to make plan. They have to incorporate everything in their Gram Panchayat development plan. According to that, I think this policy document should have provision for that. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Vijay. Now we have presentations from the states. Actually, in the pre-lunch session also, there were certain presentations from states which we couldn't get it done because of shortage of time. Now, pre-lunch session, the presentation went on proposed policy based on previous experiences. It was quite general. Now, this session, the presentations are again on the same, so it is overlapping. Are there any states would like to come forward? I can call Tamil Nadu. Do you have something to share? The next Kerala.
Sir, I will be presenting separately.
Okay.
Just one.
Odisha. Tamil Nadu can go ahead. Okay, Mr. Raman, Commissioner for Disaster Management from Tamil Nadu State Disaster Management Authority is here. So he will be sharing his experiences on the proposed policy and whatever is being done in their state in this sector. So next, Odisha, is anyone there from Odisha? Would you be making some? Okay, you would like to share. And in the earlier session, the states were. Who was there? Okay, no. Earlier session again, these states were there. Yeah. Okay. So, is there any other state who likes to share apart from Odisha after that, or any other stakeholder would like to share anything on the proposed policy?
Then we'll close the coastal and move to river. So coastal states will
From
move to river after that.
West Bengal. You want to share? Yeah. Okay. After.
Any coastal state, because then we'll close the chapter on coastal and move to river. After these 2 sessions are on river. So any coastal state?
Any coastal state can. So after Tamil Nadu, then Odisha, and then West Bengal. Then we will close the session. Okay, Mr. Raman.
Thank you,
Over
sir.
to you. Yeah.
Respected Chair and Chairperson and Vice Chairperson, Kerala SDMA and all participants, good afternoon. I have a simple PPT, only 4-5 slides only, sir. So these are all the points already discussed here. With the scientific assessment and guidance from various institutions and organizations, we can make policy, this policy. It has come up well, sir. So as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, we have around 1,076 kilometers of coastal line. It covers around 14 districts having 608 fishing villages, in which around 10.48 lakhs fishermen population are living. This is the main criteria, sir. Apart from that, various infrastructures like major ports, minor ports, fishing harbors, minor fishing fish landing centers, these are all the major infrastructures now located in coastal areas. So during the Mandus cyclone, already this has been highlighted by NCCR scientists. Around 100-meter area has been intruded by the seawater at that time. So due to which around 10 houses have been washed away, and various community buildings have also got affected. Their main agenda is they have now given a resolution and submitted to the collector to give some mitigation. They are not ready to shift or go beyond their habitation, but they have requested to do some protective or having the erosion thing. That is the high erosion, moderate erosion and low erosion. These are all the impacts in all districts we have. So low erosion is happening in all places. They have already mentioned that various measures can be taken based on the erosion level. So for which we have also decided to have a small discussion with the NCCR and the organizations who are involved in the scientific studies, and we will come up with a solution, sir. Apart from that, sir, river erosion is also one of the main concern nowadays. See, during the southwest monsoon, 5 times the Mettur surplus water was released. So that water has all catchment areas located in Karnataka got the surplus water and come to Mettur Dam. And in no minute the Mettur Dam has filled up, it got 120 feet height, and the surplus water was released in, from the Mettur Dam to lower districts. See, the districts like Erode, Namakkal and the delta districts have got surplus water in subsequent days. So due to which the Kaveri river and the Kolidam river, that is the carrier for the surplus water, got affected. Their left bank from the lower Anaikot to the coastal area from Mayiladuthurai district to Kadalur district got affected. So for which they have prepared a proposal and they have requested around 14 crores for temporary restoration and as well as for around 500 crores for the permanent restoration. These river banks have got affected year after year. Subsequent successive events have eroded the river banks. That is why they have prepared that proposal, and now we are studying that, and we will be able to release from the SDRF. So from the reconstruction and that window, sir. So in Tamil Nadu we have from south to north so many rivers like Padayar in Kanyakumari, Tamirabarni in Tirunelveli, Vaigai in Madurai district, Madurai, Sivagangai, Ramnath districts, and then Kaveri in Delta districts, Pennar and Palar rivers are there. So in all places these river erosion is there, sir. That's all, sir. So these are all the main captures during the season, northwest and southwest monsoon season, sir. This is one of the things. These are all the points we have to decide, sir. Already we have discussed during the last sessions. All speakers have highlighted all these subjects. That only we have highlighted. The location-specific structural interventions and nature-based solutions we need to think over. Then the community-based infrastructure development and their involvement is very important, sir. At that time, we should also think over CRZ conditions and National Green Tribunals, their cautions are also there. So these are all the main concerns, sir. Main thing is timelines and funding. So timelines means within the shorter span of time, we have to execute the projects. That is the main concern, for which we need the funding. That's all, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Raman. Tamil Nadu, we know, is doing some very good work in many of the Government of India projects, and you just mentioned for river erosion also you have done quite a bit. I'll request, on behalf of NDMA, that if you can share something what you have done on river erosion, because that is one cause of thing that we don't have much information of what is being done, what can be done for river erosion.
Yes.
Please share something in detail so that we can learn and then share it with other states.
Yes.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
If we will take any questions for all the group of states now. Odisha, you requested that you want to share something. Then after Odisha, West Bengal.
Thank you, Chair and Co-Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I was expecting the State Disaster Management Authority team to come and make a presentation, but I am just want to share the dais because Satvaya, as Mr. Eklavyaji said, it was the first rehabilitation program, forced rehabilitation because of coastal disaster. So, and it has been, it happened in 1971, around 5 villages were completely destroyed by the sea. And then after almost 28 years, again in 1999, we saw a cyclone that affected more than 2 crores of people and killed 15,000 of them. So the main thing what I want to share is the mangrove that was there in the early, in the post independence time, it shrunk by almost 50% by the time we reached 1971. And many scientists now also blame the coming of Paradip port that also created a lot of destabilizing effect, like it was shown in the Tamil Nadu, the other presentation, when a new port comes up and there are other effects on the north side and south side. So it is only because of the mangroves we think that 1999 cyclone, this Bhitarkanika area was completely saved from the onslaught of the cyclone, whereas just beyond that, where the mangroves were destroyed in the Mahanadi mouth to build the port, that area was completely devastated. So now with the rehabilitation, the first rehabilitation program, I think after independence, around 571 families have been rehabilitated into a rehabilitation center. And as other presentations were also talking about it, there are socio-economic factors. Rehabilitations were not thought of the concern, the emotional attachment to the area, and people were just taken from one place, and because they are forced in a situation like that, they were rehabilitated in another area which was earlier a forest area. It was denotified and only 10 decimal of land was given to each of the families. So 571 families with only the land to build their home. Their access to their own agricultural land, their access to the sea, all was forbidden, and now this has again come under the national park and sanctuary area. So people are not able to go for cultivation. Earlier they are doing buffalo grazing, fishing and paddy cultivation. They are not allowed to do those things. So that is how what we see when these kind of situations come up in case of rehabilitation.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Do you have a policy of rehabilitating people just like Kerala, and is there any rate decided for that?
No, there are.
Of now, none.
Yes, no. This 2006 RNR policy is completely different. But when it comes to this kind of hazardous, I think the coastal erosion and displacement rehabilitation, there is no such policy. And the total compensation was given roughly was 1.2 lakhs and a 10 decimal of land. So that is where the situation now demands that whenever there are such situations, people who are displaced, they are neither in the situation to cope with the condition, nor they are to leave that place. So you will find the connection between Kerala and Satvaya is the longest running bus route is from Satvaya village to Trivandrum. It runs for 3 days continuously. Lot of girls come to work in Kerala, Trivandrum and other areas to earn their livelihood. Out of 571 families, maybe around 200 or 300 girls are there in the age group of 15 to 18. Those who come to Kerala and other such areas in search of job, because they don't have anything to do in their own area. So they are almost displaced from their whatever their traditional practices, their grazing, fish collection, paddy, all those things. So whenever we are talking about the rehabilitation policies, so Eklavya, I was exactly, when we are discussing, we are doing a study, we said that these things need to be very strongly and very seriously taken into consideration. They are linked to the root and their socio-economic challenges, and also taking, whenever we are talking of the advancement, the local developments. So that is how Odisha is one of the, we can say it is a classic example of forced rehabilitation, which other states, other places, other areas can take a clue from. And when we are framing a policy, it can come with other policies. There are many other rehabilitation policies. So it can be clubbed, or there can be some combination where other things where there is no fixed amount, like you said, there is a policy for rehabilitation. It may not be there, but there are other resources from Panchayat, other different finance commission resources which can be dubbed in, and they can be do. I am not very comfortable with those kind of things. So that is what I am like. Just another 10 seconds I'll take. Like now we are working on a project called ECRIC, enhancing climate resilience of India's coastal communities. It is happening in 22 landscapes in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. In Odisha, we are doing, our NGO is doing in 2 places, Mahanadi Mouth and Vitarkanika. Around 500 villages will be, their resilience build up, their livelihood support, training, skill building, and then linking to their own traditional resources without affecting the geological and the wildlife and the national park rules and regulations. That is going to start, which is a kind of a 3-year project, and these kind of things can really help these communities to come up with a new solution to the challenges we are facing. So just urbanization or displacing somebody is not going to help the rehabilitation package in the long run. And as we are saying, many of the small islands are also kind of in another 30 years or 40 years, they will be inside the sea. So the entire India's coast is also facing the same situation. A lot of things in Andhra Pradesh, Odisha border, also a lot of places like the other one is showed in Puducherry. So same thing is happening in other places in Odisha also. There are a lot of films also now UNICEF is making and OSNOA is making. So we can take clue from that, and the same thing can be included. Maybe eastern coast is little different from the western coast, but Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal and Odisha, they can club together, and other states also they have their own policies. Thank you. I just didn't have a presentation to make, otherwise I would have made a very specific one. Thank you anyway for giving me time.
For
Thank you.
sharing some new insights. When you mention about rehabilitation needs of people who do not own property.
Yes, sir.
Like people who are involved in grazing of animals, what is to be done if they lose their livelihood. So that aspect needs to be kept in mind. You also flagged that 500 villages you have taken up in Odisha for resilience building.
Yes,
Earlier session somebody has raised a point of adaptation. So this is something in practice you are attempting. So thanks a lot for sharing.
This is a green climate fund. Come, Government of India, Government of Odisha, and UNDP is the channel partner.
Thanks
so
a
this
lot.
is a 5-year project, very ambitious project, and our target is 56,000 families in 5 years.
Thanks a
so
lot.
it's an enormous task, but let's see how.
Now I
we are
invite
doing. Thank
West
you, sir.
Bengal. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you, sir.
sir.
Thank you.
West Bengal. What is your name, please? I didn't even mention your name.
Madhusmit Pati. I represent one NGO called Nature's Club.
Okay, you are
So
representing.
we're working in
Okay.
Vitarkanika and Manali for the last 30 years.
Thanks.
So this is our focus area.
Right.
Thanks to all. Basically, originally situated lower basin of Ganga, but 2 districts like Malda and Murshidabad is very much affected. About 12 blocks are very much affected, and West Bengal government is trying to provide them land patta as well as government housings and other panchayat level schemes. But it is not enough, because a mass portion of the river bed of Ganga adjacent to the Murshidabad and Malda are silted. That's why river are flowing both sides of rivers, affecting erosions. So every year and throughout the year, some peoples are being shifted to another place, and this point we need permanent constructions, otherwise river erosion cannot be protected there. Beside this, Sundarban area, basically a deltic region, and coastal erosion also happened there. We are trying to educate people, skill training, and we are trying to involve them tourism-based activities so that they can earn alternative income. Not only that, we are trying to all fishermen involved into MSME units and other panchayat level activities. Basically, these regions, SC/ST population is very high density. That's why all the people are trying to involve SC/ST development schemes, and they are being benefited by this kind of schemes. Beside this, district like Midnapur has a long coastline, but every year when severe cyclone is happened, all the a great portion of the district become inundated through brackish water. That's why most of the farmers are very affected by this kind of inundation. So we are trying to give them insurance so that they can benefited by this kind of schemes. Beside this, North Bengal, we have a flash flood erosion because soil of this region is very sandy and not compact. That's why flash flood causing so much erosion here. So a separate special plan be needed for this region. So that's all, sir.
Thank you, West Bengal. You informed us how you are utilizing existing banking institution schemes to link up with people who are getting affected, fishermen, vulnerable SC/ST population. Okay. Thanks for sharing your experiences. So this brings us to the end of this session. This is the coastal erosion. I have my co-coordinator of this session with me, Dr. Shekhar, Member Secretary of KSDMA. So I invite Shekhar to share his thoughts, experiences of Kerala. If you want to say something about, Chief Secretary mentioned about 10 lakh package, that is for landed people. Now, like Odisha was mentioning about the need for people who are getting affected who do not own land. So what is the policy of Kerala?
Thank you, sir. Yes, we already have had thought about this in 2018. The coastal erosion program that Honorable Chief Secretary mentioned in the morning is Punargeham. It's a program where we wanted to relocate people who are from HST, the high tide line, HTL, to 50 meters. So whoever is living within that, we wanted to relocate them beyond the 50 meter so that they are less prone to coastal vagaries. But in the meantime, in 2018, we also commissioned another program called a Vulnerability Linked Relocation Plan. And therein, we have a process of identifying land parcels which are hazard susceptible. And we offer them 10 lakhs proactively. So we certify it and then we offer them 10 lakhs proactively. And if they pick that money, they can keep the land, but then any permanent construction therein is then denotified. So the house number is withdrawn, and thereby the electrical connectivity, the water connection, their land, their building taxation, everything will cease to exist. But they can use that land for agriculture or other activities. So the reason why we decided to do it that way is that people have an emotional bond, and we can't just ignore their emotional bond and say that, yeah, you better move out of your forefathers' land or your grandparents' land. So that was addressed. And in the meantime, we also, as you know, faced the century's worst floods in Kerala 2018. So there was this question, this very same question of what to do with people who live in Purambok land, in no man's land, in the government land, which is not vested to them, assigned to them. And we took a decision that we will not consider them as people who live in untitled land or land without title to them, but we will consider them as disaster affected, and because any disaster is an opportunity to build forward better, therefore we facilitated the same support to them. So we extended it wholeheartedly to such people. We had about 800 such families who were kind of identified, facilitated with this funding, and with the help of cooperative sector, our PACs, agriculture, primary agriculture cooperatives, we built houses for them and moved them and gave them a titled land. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, disasters are also opportunities to build forward better. So we have a very clear approach towards doing this. And yes, rightly as pointed out from the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, we have had a paradigm shift in the disaster management approach in Kerala since 2019, when Honorable Chief Minister decided that local governments have to take the center stage of disaster management. And you can see out there, we completed the disaster management plan of all local governments in the state, and we also connected it to the SDMF as a funding channel. We have a P4R action, a kind of incentivization which happens through it. But we must realize that when we go to that granularity, a lot of these hazard assessments needs to be kind of redone with very local information. So there, I would urge upon NDMA at this moment. There is a huge lot of LIDAR data lying in NRSE for the entire coastline. I think Suresh is somewhere here. He has access to it, but rest of the states, I think none of us have access to this LIDAR data, which is very essential to identify and kind of locally fix which are those families, which are those plots that are going to be affected. So I would request NDMA to step in and ask them to provide this data to states so that we can refine our approach. We can be more clearer in that. So with that, sir, I will stop here. Thank you, sir.
You can only wind up and summarize it.
Yes. Harsh sir desires that I kind of summarize. It was very interesting to look at perspectives from practical experience, which dates back, and how Eklavya looked at it. And of course, the response of Panchayati Raj, I already said, yes, that's something that we have to underline across this country. If Panchayati Raj is what our father of the nation envisaged, then that's the route to take. And Kerala, as you know, is a champion in Panchayati Raj, so 49% of the state's budget is more or less controlled by them. They are very powerful as entities. And we don't regret empowering them better and better and better, because then the services are more local, and the same shoes fits for all approach will not be there, because then the local governments will decide what is correct and appropriate. To give you an example, there's a very interesting work that happened in Alleppey. Along the coastline, Alleppey is by and large a coastal district, and it's below mean sea level, like the Dutch. So we told that this year that the panchayats will only get an approval for their annual plan, provided they keep one project for disaster management, because the 14th Finance Commission of Panchayati Raj had already earmarked a huge lot of money for them on DM. And some of these solutions some of these projects were like paving or tile packing the frontage of a Gram Panchayat. So we were like, what is disaster management, and why are you kind of doing these kind of works there? So we proactively went and spoke to these people to understand why they are keeping these kind of things. They said, see, for you, disaster management might be a big cyclone coming in or a flood coming in. For us, this is Panchayati Ghar is where 1,000 people come every day. And because that these days, water is repeatedly on a diurnal basis reaching the Panchayati Ghar front courtyard, we would like our people to be coming in without keeping by keeping their feet dry. So we need to do it, and that's DM for them. That's a solution for them. Now for us, we might discount it as not a solution, but for them it's a solution. So similarly, there are a lot of local practices that we need to kind of intervene here, sir, and for that a lot more of granular data is essential. So from this whole session, connecting to what we listened in the morning, I think at this juncture, from the coastal erosion perspective, there is not one solution. There will be a multiplicity of solutions, and maybe when I present, I might also be throwing out few more problems, wicked problems that we face, for which we need to seek solutions. So a bit more the framework. Yes, it's good to have a policy and a framework, but there could be an openness to digest in better the local practices that might have to be looked at. So that's the gist that I would carry, sir, if sir has anything to correct me on it. Thank you.
Shekhar, see, when we empower panchayats or they ask them to make a project, the know-how required for that probably is lacking with them. Even DDMA, I talked to Kannur district collector. So DDMA doesn't have any such kind of know-how or technical ability to coin a project for the coastal area. Mitigation point of view. Response point of view, probably they can do that. So how do we address that?
Sir, with respect to this, yes, if you look at a grand solution which is probably for a district, even for a district scale, it will not happen. So first thing is to make them aware, the local governments aware that they are to find solutions. And what is being tried under the Nammal Namukai program in the 14th Finance Commission period is to connect local institutions, arts and science colleges and engineering colleges to these local governments. So 1 or 2 or 3 local governments are getting connected to these individual colleges that are available, so that the professional expertise that is available there could be tapped in. 2, at the district level, for example, in the 4 Pamba Basin districts, what we have done is we are facilitating what is called a climate change adaptation professional. So all these local governments have one person now made available from our P4R action. So they are supporting them to network with all experts and come up with solutions that are very local. Pan state or pan district, it is obviously Water Resources Department which will come up primarily with a lot of these infrastructure projects, but we need to move them out slowly with a mix. Now it's very grey, which is true, and that essentially has to be made into grey, blue, or maybe even a green solution. That's something that we need to think.
Just academic knowledge. I think we should also have experience-based knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
no, I think you have raised an extremely important point. That when we say locally driven program interventions, I mean, people can be more anecdotal about it, but when it has to be reduced in writing in a project form, it requires some expert assistance. So the policy makes a reference to the expert assistance, and I think that's the function of the SDMA and DDMA, that they should make the services of experts available so that the feasibility of various mitigation options can be studied, assessed, and included. It cannot be planned by panchayats. So the point is well taken, and I think the policy will have a specific resources allocated to the development of the projects. They need to work with the local governments. That's also a given, but we definitely need expert sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Anantal. Thanking all the presenters as well as the stakeholders for actively participating in the session. And now we are moving on to the 4th session, Program on Mitigation Measures for the River Erosion. We'll have 3 presenters as well as 1 discussion. Now may I request the Chair, Sri Keshu Hingonia, the Special Secretary, Punjab, as well as the Co-Chair, Professor Siyadani Hussain, retired from Every, to come forward and occupy the chairs, please.
Wherever the mic goes, the chair is.
yeah. Mic is the chair.
Mic is the chair.
We will have 2 mics.
Just give this.
Be seated.
Who is the chair?
Okay. We have this session on river now. May I request Sri Eklavya ji? This is your floor.
Sorry, sir? That's true. Both. Yeah. Okay, now the topic that I'll be talking about is basically the policy which concentrates on the other aspect of erosion, which is river erosion. And in order to, formulate this part of the policy, like the way we had consultations in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, we had consultations in UP, Bihar, Bengal and Assam. What was really interesting in this whole space from UP to Assam, that we had three different typologies of river erosion. One which we saw, which was prevalent, is in UP and Bihar. They are somewhat similar compared to what we saw in Sundarbans in Assam, to a totally different kind of a river erosion which we witnessed in Majuli Islands in Assam. Within UP and Bihar, there were other forms of river erosion. One that was brought in by or rather induced by the big rivers, and the others were by the small rivers, which are basically small sporadic rivers between India and Nepal, or even within India. So within 4 states, we had so much of diversity as far as the problem is concerned. And therefore it was a challenge to bring them together in one framework and to talk about these strategies, whether we talk about mitigation strategies or whether we talk about rehabilitation strategies. The way we were able to do this was because of the fact that we had a very proper guideline which was actually guiding us through the entire initiative that we did. Now, for us it was also very important, while we were writing this policy, to be very specific in terms of how are we looking at a particular disaster like river erosion vis-a-vis the kind of strategies that we are talking about, whether it's mitigation, whether it's rehabilitation. So what you must have observed, that there is a pattern that I'm following in all my presentations, where I'm trying to talk about the classifications of either rehabilitation in coastal erosion, mitigation in coastal erosion. We are doing the same thing here, classification of mitigation in river erosion areas. So this is a pattern because this is what has helped us to identify the minute details and try to incorporate them when we were putting this policy together. Though it might sound slightly repetitive, but there are different elements that come in when we talk about the classification, and when we further classify these classified, we further classify these classifications. Now, as far as specific strategies are concerned, when we talk about river erosion, it all again starts from the fact that there is an acute absence, or rather there is lack of information about river erosion, to be very frank and to be upstate, because when we were writing the portion of coastal erosion, we had a lot of data. And in fact, right now we are kind of doing this, we are rewriting parts of the policy, and this issue is again coming up as to where do we get the numbers as far as river erosion is concerned, and probably that is the reason which prompted Sir to mention that we need institutions like what we have with the with coastal erosion related institutions. We need to have one for river erosion as well. So when we do not have an wider issue, an institution which is actually governing this issue or looking after it or studying it, we have to generate the data, because without the data we will not be able to intervene in any which way, or rather if we do not intervene with the data, we will be sporadic, we will not be doing it in a scientific manner. So therefore a lot of stress has been given in the policy with regard to data generation at the micro level. And when we say the micro level, it's also about how we bring in the Panchayati Raj, how not only they become the source of information, but they also become the guiding factor or the institutions which guide us to the places which needs attention as far as mitigation is concerned. Similarly, this I have already used, but then it is important to also bring in, there are a lot of these invisible areas when we talk about river erosion. So river erosion is definitely not only about banks getting eroded. When you go to the river eroded areas, or when you go to the riverine areas where erosion is rampant, you'll see a lot of these invisible spaces like Diara, like Char, which basically are areas which are subjected to erosion, and the scenarios are far more worse there. Now, if we have to ensure about a socio-economic protective strategy for them, definitely they would be very different from what we are trying to talk about, the habitations which are located along the river banks. Therefore, it is important to look into these diverse areas which will actually throw up different strategies. So again, unifying strategies or providing a figure to those strategies is going to be difficult, but at least we'll have a wide array of menu which will give us as to what needs to be done in such places. We have talked about temporary settlements, which is also very important. Like what Sir said earlier, which I actually missed when I was talking about the rehabilitation, and that it's not about being relocated all the time, it's also about in situ rehabilitation. Here we are talking also in terms of how do we deal with a scenario where people are neither away from the places nor they are in a new place, or they continue to stay there but they are devoid of basic services. And that is where we are bringing in this whole importance of temporary settlement. And how do we look at temporary settlement, and what should be the way in which it should be developed in areas which are prone to river erosion. Livelihood has also been a big issue. This was also reflected in the coastal erosion affected areas, but we have seen that livelihood security, especially in areas which are affected by river erosion, are also the most poorest spots, or rather habitations across the country. So if you pick up Bihar, whether you look at UP, or whether you look at pockets in West Bengal, or you go to Assam, these are areas which are far, far, far backward compared to the other areas. So when we are talking about mitigation strategies, it is but obvious that we will talk about the livelihood security, and livelihood security also needs to be looked from an angle of how prone are these habitations to river erosion. So therefore the policy has been very candid and has talked about how the livelihood security measures need to be taken up or need to be addressed when we are talking about areas which are prone to river erosion. We have also, someone was talking about innovations, or someone was talking about whether there is a space in the policy which looks at innovations or newer interventions. There is a space, and there is a mention about how how can we actually innovate the mitigation measures in the policy, which again creates space, and it makes this policy quite a dynamic policy rather than a very static policy which doesn't have any scope. And the fact that we are talking about climate change, it is but natural that we create that space which has allows people to, adapt it to the changing scenarios. As I said, and I mentioned about it earlier in my presentation today, that in this particular presentation, that there is diversity as far as as far as river erosion is concerned, as far as the typology, as far as the character of the erosion and impact is concerned. And therefore, the policy also takes into account these unique locations. Now, when I talk about unique locations, it's about Sundarbans, it's also about the river islands like Majoli. And we were also told today that someone was mentioning, I think so it was Nirmalya who was mentioning, that there are other riverine islands also which needs to be looked into. So therefore, this policy is also in a way not only looking at a kind of river erosion, but also has identified, or maybe in the coming years when we start looking more into the reality from that perspective, we will have many such unique locations which requires our attention. Again, the fact that there is always this whole debate whether we need to be structural in our approach or we need to be non-structural in our approach. Till now, whatever we have talked about in this under the mitigation of river erosion, there has been a constant effort to talk about issues which have been avoided or which have been overlooked till now. Infrastructure related or structure related interventions are already there. It is important, and that is what even the policy is trying to project as to how important is the non-structural measures which we need to look at and plan along with the state and the DDMs. I think so I will end my presentations here. Thank you.
I have a few questions, Eklavya ji, from the audience. First, I would request if there is any question.
Eklavya, you was pointing about islands. See, we have backwater islands in Kerala, numbering something like 1,800 odd. Okay, but out of that, there are certain islands which are being inundated because of the perigel tide and things like that. And on the other side, when the river runoff comes, again they get flooded. And from this side, when the tide comes, they get flooded. So this kind of situation, there are one island specifically, Mandro Island in Kollam district. We have a enormous degradation. Due to the constant submergence, even the soil fertility has gone, and it has become a cemetery of coconuts. Coconut doesn't have the top. It has got only the tree standing there without any protection. So similarly, agriculture has gone because of the salinity intrusion into the system. So such issues probably, if it can be addressed, because it doesn't come directly under the erosion issue, whether it is river or coastal. But it has undergone an enormous degradation because of this submergence.
All such islands are definitely included in the scope of this policy. That is a given.
Yeah.
Not that, because all the processes that impinge upon these islands, they are very much akin to the factors that bring erosion, trigger erosion. So I don't think those islands can be excluded from the scope of the policy.
Thank you, sir.
Besides that, sir, in case an island is a part of soil erosion, rehabilitation is taking place over here, then it should be mentioned that area should be fed through distributed energy sources.
I think this is a good suggestion. Yeah. She is suggesting that it should be through the distributed, all such islands should be fed through distributive energy sources.
I hope I made my point clear.
I think this is absolutely recommended. All of them should get access to energy, and all the feasible sources of energy must be explored.
And that too off-grid, sir.
So, in this context, when the riverbank erosion context, when we talk about island, as we move into rivers, we are talking about fluvial geomorphology. And in fluvial geomorphology, if the channel is meandering or it is braiding, it will create certain kind of what we say as sandbars. So when we talk about these islands, we are essentially talking about the mid-channel sandbars, which you often see in the Himalayan river systems as you move downstream from the hills to the plains, to the floodplains. And of course, the point that you are saying is extremely important because particularly in Assam, where you have a lot of mid-channel sandbars, which are quite away from the power grid, their decentralized solar systems, for example, are an essential component to actually build, if our objective is to reduce vulnerability and build resilience, of course what you were saying.
That is why I talked about off-grid solution, not on-grid. This is extremely important. Even if you are going for distributed energy resources and if you go for on-grid, then again the same kind of problem will occur.
Actually, you cannot go for on-grid because often these mid-channel sandbars are so far away, particularly when we talk about the Brahmaputra river system, they are so far away that grid connection would be actually a very distant phenomenon.
I think we need to differentiate from rivers. The Himalayan rivers and this peninsular river, like for example Periyar or Kaveri, cannot be compared with the Himalayan flown rivers. Second thing is that most of the rivers are already regulated, and because of this, there is uncertainty in release of water or enhance or decrease of flow. Because of that, there is erosion is taking place. So in the policy document, we can also suggest to integrate the disaster management prone areas or disaster area prone areas with the conservation of flow of the rivers. Somewhere we have to link the disaster with the flow.
See, peninsular rivers, what has happened, if you look at the peninsular rivers, a large number of dams have been constructed on these rivers. And because of dams in all these places, what has happened that whenever there is a heavy rainfall and the water is discharged from dams, and all the dams are simultaneously discharging water, because all of them need to protect the dams. So there is a drainage congestion. The water does not drain out properly. And as a result, there is a huge amount of flooding and huge amount of erosion. So all these rivers which would earlier not create erosion are now creating erosion. So there is a need for, of course, better management of reservoirs and more coordinated release of water from. But at the same time, we also need to think of, what we say, more room for the rivers so that the water spreads and we have less erosion. When the water actually moves within a very narrow channel, I think the pressure of erosion is much, much higher and stronger. So that's the problem that we face in peninsular rivers.
So there is one more point I want to make here. This is regarding the temporary makeshift arrangements that you guys were talking about. So in that case, I'll suggest that the temporary arrangements, the temporary connections I'm talking about by electricity department, it should be released within 24 hours of application. Otherwise, most of the time keep on stucking and 7 days, 15 days, they take a lot of time. So in case this points appears in your policy, then it will be like bang on.
Sir, just wanted to add on to the dam, because you were also you mentioned about the deltas are shrinking because of the major reservoirs and dams. So that not only the water flows, but the sediment also, it settles as in the reservoir.
Yes.
The flow of sediments is much reduced.
Yeah.
We have measured some of the rivers, which was like, for example, Krishna Basin. We have measured 4 million tons. Earlier it was about 12 million tons. So this huge amount of sediment is lost, so that the deltas are shrinking, and then also both sides it is affected. I think that is another problem.
Thank you And next speaker, please. Mr. Abdul Karim.
No, I think, sorry, we have somebody who looks from the sky, from the satellite and sees what happens to the... Suresh Babuji, please.
Yes.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. So, I am Suresh Babu, scientist working in NRSC ISRO as a head flood mapping and hazard assessment. I am more involved in near real-time flood map generation and then dissemination to the state and central disaster management support organizations. So that will, you might be receiving in different time periods. So that's my introduction. So this my presentation will be slightly different from whatever you have heard in the morning. That is mostly on the field perspective. So my presentation will throw a light on how different kind of information can be generated from satellite data and how it can be supported to your documentation so that the overall perspective view can come to the management or government. Yeah. So I'll just complete my presentation by showing different examples which will talk about the net impact of the top processes, whatever we have discussed from the morning. So suppose if I want to monitor through satellite data what is happening on the ground, the first part is I have to acquire the satellite data. So I should have some kind of a general information from the public or from the district authorities. Where are there is a possibility of proneness to the riverbank erosion and deposition. Then I need to plan for multiple satellite data sets so that we can understand the rate of growth and the severity of the erosion and deposition in those particular areas. The third one is we should talk about the interpretation of the images, which maybe each state is having the capacity building towards that through state application, remote sensing application centers. Then the comparison, when it comes to the actual process, once I have the images, I should know the previous and versus present so that we can compare what is the severity of that, and we can also quantify those issues. Then identification of hotspots will help us to formulate the project so that the prioritization of the projects can be done. The last one is whenever you are preparing some project report from the field, you can always put this remote sensing based assessment as an attachment so that it will add the strength to your proposal. This is what actually I wanted to put the things in a nutshell. Then coming to the specific examples, then I will conclude how it is going to help us in your process. In 1 minute, I will talk about what is satellite remote sensing so that some people who are not aware of this particular technology, I wanted to apprise them. Basically, satellite takes the data from the Earth observation satellites based on the spectral reflectance of the characters on the objects on the surface, and then it creates like an image, and there are some interpretation techniques. For each feature, there will be a different response. There is a basic fundamental in the satellite data interpretation. Then once I have got the satellite data, I know how to separate the different classes, and then try to draw through visual interpretation or the machine learning based techniques, or maybe some other simple techniques. So if I get the more high resolution satellite data, I can have more details. That is a simple fundamental. Suppose if I want high resolution data, the satellite data, I need to spend more money, and I need to spend more time to interpret that so that we can get the better quality of the output. Then coming to the examples, in this year, unfortunately before this event we have completed 2 reports which are the studies on bank erosion and deposition along Kosi and Brahmaputra also. I am just trying to present an actual case study since it is available with me now. The initial assessment, what is happening in Kosi River. If I take last 10 years, 2011 to 2021, if I see the 14 districts are affected, in each case maybe different eroded areas are there, deposited areas are there, which talks about the prioritization of the projects and areas where you can really put the proposals. Morning we are discussing about how to formulate the proposals. You may be having in different districts, but when it comes to the state level, probably they can take a cue from these kind of reports, or you can generate these reports. Anyone can generate these reports once you have access to satellite data and then interpret the satellite data. This is one of the example. Then coming to the specific examples within this, if you just see, there is a, I just have written some study area there. examples looks similar, but for the interpretation purpose and for appraising, I brought out similar images only so that you can see different kind of case studies. Here it is actually this channel is disappeared. It is because of it could be a change in the land use, or there is no pressure in the other side, and the river is flowing in this one. in 10 years that is disappearing, and new kind of land use is coming and agriculture is coming. Is it also useful to us? That in that perspective also, some of the study areas we can see so that we don't have to spend time on that, money on that.
Where is the Kosi river?
Sir?
Where is the Kosi river?
Sir, it is actually taken.
You are saying Kosi basin change.
Yeah, Kosi basin.
So where is the Kosi river?
I just come back. I'll show you, sir. Yeah, this is the one, sir. The right side actually. So this is a similar example. So just I wanted to give a oversight on this thing. So this is actually, if I see that magenta color, that is eroded area, and then the cyan color, that is a deposited area. So like this we can have a detailed study in different stretches, and then come to a conclusion to go to the field and then prioritize some projects. Yeah, this is then coming to this is upper portion of that, and this is. These are 10 years difference, sir. Suppose if we have more different, maybe this kind of studies can be planned every 5 years, and then we can try to understand the changes across our study areas. Then coming to the bank erosion deposition in Brahmaputra, actually the study was done by me and my colleague Sharma is also here. This is actually the total results. I have the reports that I can put in the exhibition. Someone can have a look at to have a cursory understanding of this, though I have presented the glimpses. You can see the major changes in this. Yeah. So as a conclusion, I just would like to tell a few points. Basically, these kind of studies and analysis will we can understand to know net impact. Whether the reasons may be different, which can be analyzed and studied. Net impact can be known, and we can also quantify so that we can make DPRs, detailed project reports or project reports based on the field studies, and then we can convert into the kind of impact assessment. Suppose if we take some measures, next after 5 years or after 3 years we can see and then understand the impact assessment, so that these can become a case studies for a future funding pattern. Suppose this is for this kind of a problem, this is the kind of a measure we have taken, and then we can understand to build up a archive of case studies, so that the funding priorities can be done more technically and more with high prioritization, and then definitely the documentation will go stronger and stronger over a period of time. If we do continuously like 5 years, 6 years, we will develop hundreds of case studies because funding is there. Definitely people will execute, and then this kind of study and the process what is happening and what is the result that we can understand. These are some of the points which I want to highlight through this particular presentation.
Dr. Sekhar, I have one question. Suresh, how often we can monitor?
Sir, it all depends on the program what we decide. We can often every year, we can often 2 years.
No. For country level or regional level.
Sir, it can be done. Only thing is there should be a program. There should be a set of people who would like to work on that. Program is there, automatically people will be working on that.
Yeah, please.
So, since you have talked about Kosi River, also Brahmaputra, now rivers have different order streams.
Yes.
So when we talk about this kind of erosion, can we go down to the second order, third order streams and take the basin as a whole? And how, if we want to look into history, because a lot of problem that we face in riverbank erosion, particularly those of us who work on the social side or the management side, is we come across this text that it has eroded, but we don't see a lot of data available. So if we now want to go back to the history and want to understand the 30 years, 40 years, how the channel has shifted, so how back can we go?
Sir, your question is correct. The issue is that from 2000 onwards, we have the data of almost like 5.8 meters resolution data. So that means the width of is around 20 meters, then we can identify those channels and then corrections, characteristics. Suppose if you want 40 years data, we cannot go for the lower order streams, higher order we can.
I'm saying it's very interesting conversation. We are having, like we do future modeling. This is the river in your map. How it has behaved in the past in so many 100 years and how it might behave in the future. Can this be, for everything there is modeling. I'm talking about backward modeling and forward modeling both. Is there a possibility in the realm of science that you're dealing with, or is it still a myth?
Recently our director told me the same question to initiate that particular thing. Based on the last 30 years, especially for the major channels, not for the micro channels. So can we understand this process and then try to predict at least next 10 years or something like that? So we have to take the studies for the future part. Past part, if the program is there, we can just go back to the data and then analyze and create this kind of erosion and deposition maps. Because this is done out of our own interest, because we wanted to create some case studies so that it can be demonstrated based on the requirements. Or maybe some capacity building, because we are capacity building is also part of our mandate. So we generally do this kind of case studies and keep them ready.
So, how do you do the ground truthing? You have created this deposition, erosion, but checking it in the ground and really adding, some authentic information on this process. Has there been any effort at that?
Sir, I would like to have 2 points. One is, when I am talking about medium resolution or high resolution data, almost the features are similar. We did not go to the ground resolution 1% also. When we are talking about the structural changes, like one house damaged or one house we got, newly constructed, those kind of things, probably we have to go for highest resolution data. Then nowadays the ground truthing is almost reduced by 90%. 10% still we can do, but that we have not done specific to this recent one. Suppose if any state or government is collaborating with us, they will be having some data, they can deploy their own people by taking this data, GS layers can be shared to them, they can go with GPS and then try to collaborate with that particular data, then it becomes possible. But we are seeing high resolution data, we are almost like that.
I have 2 suggestions and which are very relevant for the implementation of this policy as well. Such exercises need to be undertaken in partnership with the SDMA and DDMA. That would add much greater value. The second is this: it's extremely important to have the ground level validation. Not because your data is inaccurate, but see how the change in the course of the river, the process of erosion or deposition has affected the people, settlements, and various livelihood activities in that area need to be found out and established, and that cannot happen unless you do the ground truthing. It's a good exercise, but its value can be enhanced considerably if you look at those things. Because some of these processes are very much dependent upon what has happened in between. The change in the river of the Kosi, take the example of Kosi. Kosi used to fluctuate very wildly, change its course of the river by 70 miles, 80 miles, 100 miles. You are a meandering river. Its course has been restricted by the embankments. No, not because of other things. No, because we have constructed a large number of embankments, so its course has been restricted. Now that a river that would have meandering course has got its course very restricted, has very unintended impacts. So do not say now, if we say go by this and say, okay, now the Kosi is not fluctuating very wildly, it's not because of any other natural process, it's because the embankments, and as a result of that, the sediments are, the level of sediment actually has increased, it has reduced the carrying capacity of Koshi, and it creates all kinds of flood-related problems in Koshi. See, so if you do some ground truthing, you will find that there is a very, very altogether different dimension of the reality that emerges. So that's my request. Thank you.
Sure. We will collaborate with state DMR.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Dr. Sekhar, please. Can you please introduce yourself? Please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Shekhar, Member Secretary, Kerala State Disaster Management Authority. Yes, we were talking about what is happening in the coast and what is happening on the surface, but there is a process which actually is happening at the headways of the rivers, which I would like to talk to you about. It's soil piping, nothing but soil piping. Yes, you are in Kerala and you probably would know this is one of the most densely populated states in the country. We have 859 people per square kilometer, and there are parts of Trivandrum city which has more than 18,000 people per square kilometer. So you can imagine the density of people here. We are definitely prone to various types of erosion. Yes, 15% of the state is prone to a lot of debris flows. Coastline is largely prone to erosion, about 55% is. And we have something very unique which is called soil piping or land subsidence owing to soil piping, which basically is a head river process which kind of creates a lot of storage streams but also damages a lot of property. You can see how it looks like down there below that house. What you see is 7 meters below ground and is a 70-meter long tunnel which is formed naturally, and it results in these houses caving in. We have already mapped where we are facing these issues. We know where the debris flows trigger from. We know where the coastal erosion cases are. We know soil erosion, piping prone areas. We have mapped them. We have a technology for looking at them. And in the meantime, I also have to bring to the notice of Eclavia and of course NDMA. Yes, it's always not erosion that alone is the problem. Deposition is also a serious problem in states like Kerala, where you have a density of population which is beyond imagination, and these pictures tell a tale on its own. What do you do with this debris? Where is that provisioning other than SDRF to remove it? But then even if you remove it, there is also a displacement issue related to this, so people are forced to move. Therefore, it shall only not be erosion, but the deposition consequent to erosion needs to also be finding some space in the policy, because then otherwise we miss out a large chunk of land which gets unutilized. So going back to piping, I'll focus only on piping now. It's tunnel erosion, large tunnels. This soil cancer, once it starts in an area, it just keeps expanding and expanding, and that area eventually becomes what you see in Chambal. It becomes badlands, and this is a process that gets triggered unnoticed. Erosion consequent to flooding a large river, yes, we notice it. Even a small rivulet, we do notice. Coastal erosion, we do know. But this, there is no way that you detect it from space. There's no way that you detect it even if you are standing on top of it. So what happens is people just go and build houses, and without knowing that 5 meters down the line, you have this big cavity which will at some point of time cave in. It's a phenomena that is largely occurring because of atypical soils, sodic soils. It's reducing soils. Tropics are reducing soils, and obviously places where you have lateritic reducing soils, this is very common, particularly also when you have sodic soils. So if there are saprolites that are reducing into sodic soils, then this is accelerated. So if you look from outside, it's very inconspicuous. You see an inlet and you have to really go around and trace to find the outlet, and the outlets are of that dimension, so you really don't sometimes see it. We did a database of this soil piping with a handsome funding from NDMA long back in 2013, and we started looking at geophysical investigations on how we can detect it. We went on to electrical resistivity, which we found as the most appropriate method for that. Again, there are also anomalies that you can't cover through these resistivity studies. We also obviously did procure some instruments that helps us do this resistivity studies. And this is one classic large soil pipe which is 75 meters in length and about 4 to 5 meters below ground, and we kind of crawled in with oxygen and everything to see how it goes. Of course, we were sure that there is life inside because bats were there. If bats are there, oxygen is there and it's safe to go. And bats don't settle in places where there is a lot of dynamism. So unless it's a settled, stable cave, bats don't live there. So we went inside and looked at it. This was one case study that we did. And when you start looking at it, we see that national highways, below national highways, we have pipes that are emerging out. This is one between Cherotoni in Idiki and Udumbanur. That's a state road below which there's a large pipe which goes through, and we had to close it down, and we made PWD fill it up in a particular manner so that that portion doesn't cave in. You see a brand new house. Actually, this is the house which triggered this whole study long back in 2009 when this was reported to National Center for Earth Science Studies, where K.K. Ramachandran sir was there, his colleague Shankar sir, and I went for this investigation. Dr. Vijit is also somewhere here who was part of this team. And at that point of time, we realized that a brand new house which was ready to be occupied, on that evening this large cave occurred in front of it, and they were all kind of really shocked. So they asked for the help from NSES. A lot of us went there, and we realized that the house cannot be used again, and then that house had to be just kind of wasted out. And you can see that it has a dendritic pattern like this. So once it triggers, it spreads out there. A whole hillock is affected by it. And slowly the crops also don't have water coming out. There is no water storage in the soil, so it starts drying out. You can see it wilting all around you. These are some of the examples of how some of these looks like. So we started we did a lot of meteorological and hydrological investigation in that area, and we completed a study which was handsomely funded by NDMA at that point of time, submitted it to NDMA in 2016, and the state went on to notify it as a state-specific disaster. So now it's a state-specific disaster where we give a lot of support to people who are affected by soil piping, both on crops as well as housing. This is one mitigation work that we proposed and did in an area in Pathanamthitta. The one who stands below there, Dr. Vijit, I don't see him here. Myself, Mr. Shankar, 3 of us went inside and was looking at it. Again, a house which was being built. Suddenly they found this cave. I told you that this is because of a lot of sodic soils that are happening. So you can't infill it with soil that is available locally. You need to bring in soil from somewhere else. Only foreign soil can be used, and it has to be mixed with lime so that the sodium doesn't dissipate off. Instead, it gets a bonding, a certain degree of cohesion. And we devised a scheme of doing it with a lot of used tire. So NBS, this nature-based solutions we wanted to try. And what we attempted was to take out all these scooter tires that were used and kind of thrown. We filled that whole sinkhole with it, infilled with foreign soil, and packed it up and said for the next 10 years don't build anything on top of it, and then we planted wet river on it so that it stabilizes. Yes, this is one approach that we took for some places where it was possible. It was not possible in Kannur, but it was possible in Pathanamthitta because of the size of it, and there were not many branches for that pipe. We went on to, I spoke about the vulnerability linked relocation plan. So this is a gist of how we look at it. It's also applicable to people who are affected by soil piping. We have an investigation methodology. So the idea is 6 lakhs for about minimum of 3 cents of land and 4 lakhs for a new house. The houses that are within 50 meters from the high tide line and houses that are certified by competent technical agencies as known livable in hazard susceptible land. So my hazard analysts go and sometimes check up and then come back and say, no, this house is not livable, we need to pay this, and then we report to the government and government pays it. This is the statistics until 2020. After that, about 5 or 6 more cases came to us. Last week, we approved about 9 more of those houses. You can see about 2,970, out of which 539 are under Punargeham, sir. And the remaining are on floods and 2018-19 floods, after which we conducted the study of which are those houses which has to be relocated because of its vulnerability. There is also a lot of greening mission happening in Kerala. You can see this. This is Harita Kerala mission. That is a greening mission where we do a lot of erosion prevention activities. These are all coir geotextile that are locally available, and MGNREGA. So a lot of convergence of funds are used here. MGNREGA is used. We also have the Harita Kerala mission funding. And then they are used to plant and kind of pack all this rivers and banks of canals like this to prevent erosion. Now to come to one of my very last slides, while displacement is considered in the policy, there is also displacement owing to deposition of eroded material. Kindly consider it as a possibility, because this deposition leads to significant crop loss, sanitation needs, and physical loss. Soil piping shall also be considered in the policy. So when you speak of river erosion, this is the headward erosion of rivers. You need to have somewhere a mention about soil piping bar tunnel erosion. And then we may also have to link it up with risk transfer centric, build forward, better approach. So the risk transfer mechanism that we are contemplating nationally and in the state, I would suggest that erosion also gets featured in the narratives of that, so that it's not just relief that we pay, but also there is a build forward, better approach brought in. Vulnerability linked relocation plan require financial assistance from NDMF. That's obvious. We can't sustain it as a state anymore. There's a limit to what states will be able to do by paying 10 lakhs. Sir, not everything. NDRF, of course, has to be after a disaster. So this is not always like that. It is susceptibility identified, and based on which we conduct a field investigation and pay. So that's why NDMF or SDMF has to be there. SDMF, we are now.
When you have a tunnel,
sir,
and you have a soil piping, it's a post-disaster situation, you know.
In that case, yes, sir. But then in some places, the tunnel, it's not just about soil piping, but also landslide susceptible areas and piping susceptible areas. So one tunnel is identified, but we will not know where the branches have gone in. So therefore, we probably will identify one face of a hill which might have 10 houses. Only one might have an exposed identifiable tunnel below it. But the rest of them will eventually come down because it's a reducing soil. So therefore, some mitigatory steps have to be taken in anticipation of what could happen to such buildings that are on top of it. And I would suggest, as a last point, for when financial support for addressing erosion linked displacement is considered, population density shall be considered as a factor, because as in the morning we were discussing about how to factor in the most appropriate, I would say, is density, because there could be very large states but then with limited population density at parts. But states like Kerala or Assam, where people come and concentrate and live, where the density is very high, there is obviously much more threat owing to such kind of displacements. So with that, I thank you.
Any question?
Any reason why it happens only in Kerala?
It may be there, sir, but it may be there, only that nobody would have proactively gone and conducted an investigation on it. Piping is a phenomena that should be there in lateritic reducing soils. So,
but it is generally soil erosion or river erosion?
No, it's soil, because the head rivers originate from these pipes. So if you go uphill, you'll start seeing it narrowing down, and in the middle of the hill it will be big. All the rivers gets this water feeding from it.
I think similar thing is happening in Josimat.
No, that's a very different story altogether. No, this is because that these are, sir, one tunnel is as big as a room. No, and then from there one small outlet will come, fill this area, water will flow here and get into the river like this.
But this has been happening. This has been happening historically, or is it a new phenomenon?
Some of these tunnels for years, otherwise it wouldn't stabilize and bats won't colonize. So most of these tunnels are bats colonizing. Only issue is they cave in kind of over years, you know. The roof slowly collapses. On top there will be a lot of crops like coconut trees and all, they fall in. And eventually somebody will go and dig for a house and then he'll construct a house and he'll go in. Or a road is laid new. So it's only when it gets evident at a point that we can start investigating. Otherwise it's large areas. For example, Kannur, when we started investigating this, we had more than 100 visible soil piping points where we had to tell families to move out and pay for it.
No, Sekhar, my point was that historically also there must be evidence, cultural, folklore evidence. So has soil piping been there in Kerala for hundreds of years, 200s of years, or is it a recent, doesn't mean recent from decades?
Nothing mentioned in the historical annals. Before we proposed this project to NDMA, there was only one research article available in this country on it, and that was by Professor Putti from IISc Bangalore. He had investigated soil piping in Karnataka, in the Ghats of Karnataka. So there was one paper on as his reference, and then we started from there to kind of go and investigate. Then we started realizing that almost every district starts to having this, and it has to be doing with the way that erosion and our soil is getting more acidic because it's reducing. It's becoming more and more lateritic. It's quite natural, but then the point is in places where people are living, like in Kerala, where almost near to the forest we have people, and all this is going to come down. So we have more than 400, 500 cases to which we paid out of this since 2017.
New learning for me.
Yeah, thank you.
There is one more question.
Yeah,
from
please.
Chaudhary.
In such cases of soil piping, do you also see groundwater playing any role? Means, or how is it different from a sinkhole which is a vertical? Because in limestone area, for example, in Meghalaya, you find this kind of areas where you find and groundwater playing a very important role. So how is this different? This is definitely not perhaps land subsidence, definitely not.
No, it leads to land subsidence eventually.
Yes, because it's getting dissolved perhaps inside. So groundwater does it, because I didn't see any groundwater.
Now let me tell you, Kerala is very limited in terms of groundwater availability. Unlike Tamil Nadu has rich groundwater resources. Kerala has a lot of phreatic water table. So that's why even if we have 44 rivers and plentiful rainfall, starting now on for the next 3 months, it's always dry, and already media has started reporting about drought. No, they perceive it as drought. They call it drought because there's only one word for both in Malayalam. But then, interestingly, this is not because of groundwater. If you go upstream through this tunnel all the way up, you will see that there are these large exposed rock of the Ghats, wherein water seeps in and starts taking a lateral path. And the lateral path of the lateral flow, we call it, lateral flow of the river or the streams, at some point will disappear into the soil. And where they disappear, there could be a rat hole or a leached root, which actually channelizes water into the softest part of the soil column. Now, soil is not uniform. In between, there are many seams and features. So a lot of different features would have been there. Some of them would have had sodic reducing properties, which has a lot of sodium content in it, which means if water reaches that point, it will just erode out. It would start probably as a rat hole, very small, but eventually over time it will take water and make it so big.
Okay. Anyone from states? Anyone?
I have just one observation. When doing the exercise on erosion, that we have come across the new dynamism that is soil piping. It's more or less related to erosion. Also that it's also the consequences relating to subsidence, and also that the state government has declared that this is a other in the realm of other natural disasters. And in this context, that I would like to know that how the scenario, how the soil piping scenario will be addressed in the realm of National Disaster Mitigation Fund and National Disaster Response Fund. Yes. So this may be reflected that so that there will be no confusion for the state government of Kerala while developing the proposal, whether this can be considered or not considered.
He had a question actually for you. Yeah. So he was asking how would soil piping reflect on NDMF so that if or under this window can be approached for funding under.
So the person who's supposed to be answering the question is asking a question. So the person who is supposed to be answering this question is asking a question is extremely difficult. So we move. I give it back to the chair.
Yep. I think you two sit and discuss this out, okay? And accordingly we will put in the minutes. From all the discussion, you might have realized that rivers are different, and they behave in different regions. They behave differentially. So in one go, we cannot make this policy to fit for all the rivers in India. Okay, so we may classify. I mean, at the policy level, we may classify the India into different zones, and apply this policy to certain applicable zones. Maybe some for southern Indian part like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, or the Gondwana land areas. Some maybe the Himalayan areas, or some maybe for northeast. So this provision at least should be there in the policy. And thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. And I will hand over to the next session chairman.
Thank you, Anandol. That was a beautiful and innovative session. So now we will have a short tea break for 10 minutes. Already we are running late by 40 minutes. So requesting all the delegates, presenters as well as all the guests to go and enjoy your tea. And requesting everyone to be back here by 4:36. Thank you. So once again, for the kind information of all invited guests, delegates and dearmost presenters, we'll have a short tea break right now for 5 minutes, and requesting everyone to come back here on time to start the next session, the section number 5, Policy on Rehabilitation Measures for River Erosion. So for the intervention, excuse me, sorry for the intervention. Once again requesting everyone, we'll have a short tea break for just 5 minutes. You can go take over the tea and come back and sit in your place and enjoy. We'll start the 5th session, session number 5, very soon. That means within 5 minutes we'll start the next session. And the section, Policy on Rehabilitation Measures for the River Erosion. We do have 3 speakers as well as one discussion on the proposed policy based on the previous experience will be discussed. And the chair will be Sri K.S. Vatsa, member of NDMA, and the co-chair Professor Nirmale Chowdhury, TISS Mumbai. So requesting all the guests and delegates to come back within few minutes.
How you? Can you please wait for? I have to go from the. This one, that is you're talking about.
Guys.
rehabilitation. Then request the chair, Sri Vatsa, member MDMA, as well as the co-chair, Professor Manali Chaudhary, TISS Mumbai, to confirm and occupy the chair, please.
मिस्टर राजा की जगह पर मिस्टर सारंगी हैं।
अच्छा, ठीक है, ठीक है।
डी सारंगी साहब हैं, वो आगे राजा की।
ठीक है, राजा की। So good afternoon, and we start this session 5. In the morning we talked about, even in the last presentation, Eklavya was hinting towards that the poorest of the people actually essentially perhaps resides in those areas which are prone to riverbank erosion. Whether you talk about UP, Bihar, Assam, West Bengal, larger Ganga Brahmaputra plains. So we will, in that context, the policy's rehabilitation component becomes very important. And as it was mentioned earlier, it's not relocation essentially, it's rehabilitation. So we will look into Eklavya's presentation on the rehabilitation component of the policy, followed by a couple of expert comments and expert presentations. So I request Eklavya to come.
I'll be talking about the area where I have been working since 2005. That's the flood-prone areas of North Bihar and a part of UP as well. And the dynamics of recurring impact on human settlement, and to also think about what are the ways forward, is something which we struggled for a very long time. Till the time we got this whole concept of flood resilient habitat and started to conceptualize this whole idea. Now while writing this policy, that experience of seeing and also living with those communities and seeing their entire house getting destroyed every year, and also at times it so happens that you have floods in cycle. So the first cycle of floods will happen, say, in terms of around June, and then you'll have kind of an explosion of erosion, which will take away a lot of parts of the habitation, and then to see people, running towards spaces which they do not own and they have to stay there, in itself is a huge challenge for people who are staying there and also for those who own that land. Therefore, this whole idea of how do we look at rehabilitation for people who are affected or displaced by river erosion was something which was very important. And as I said, we have been following a path in terms of how do we identify the minutest of issues regarding whether it's mitigation or rehabilitation. Similarly, this has been done here. The list is long. I'm not going to, the presentation is here, it will be circulated, you'll have it. But the point here is that when we talk about rehabilitation, there are so many diverse aspects of rehabilitation that needs to be taken into account. Normally, in a daily parlance, the moment we talk about rehabilitation, we start looking at it from a perspective of people being relocated from point A to point B. Now, there was a mention of if you don't have land. In Bihar, we face that kind of a challenge because even our population density is huge. It's almost about 1106 persons per square kilometer. And If you look at North Bihar, it will be far more dense. So the point here is that, when we look at rehabilitation, we have to have an overview of the area which we are talking about rather than being generic. And in order to not be generic, there are various measures or other points that we have listed in the policy which helps us to be very specific to the area where we are talking about rehabilitation. So, for instance, I would talk about how do we look at rehabilitation plan being developed with the help of the panchayat PRIs. Now that is very important, and it's just not about their involvement, but it is also about their proactiveness in developing that plan, which is very much a part of rehabilitation measure. When we talk about looking at different livelihood systems, whether it's on-farm, off-farm, that's also part of rehabilitation rather than just looking at housing. So the idea of having this particular presentation as well as part in the policy was to explore diverse ways of addressing the issue of rehabilitation. We've been talking about housing and habitat related services. Even the areas where people are staying, where we have seen erosion happening, there are ways in which people would like to continue staying in areas which are very close to their original land of habitation. Now, how do we develop those areas? How do we ensure that the services which they used to have earlier, they continue to have it? These are factors which needs to be put into the entire plan when we're talking about rehabilitation, rather than just looking at how we make the particular habitation flood-free or flood-resilient here. And there's another angle to it. When we talk about rehabilitation for river erosion, people displaced by river erosion, we need to be very clear that we should not confuse it with floods. Floods and river erosion are two different entities, and river erosion is something which is ongoing. Unlike floods, which we have it for about 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, the impact are different. Here, when we talk about river erosion, it can happen anytime, and it continues to happen. There are times when, it is said about Kosi River that, it is during the low flow is when the Kosi starts eating the land. So there are different, again, there are various stories, there are, local narratives which tell us in terms of how and what are the kind of measures that we need to take. That's it. Thank you.
For finishing it so smoothly. The floor is open for questions. If anybody wants to ask any specific question to Eklavya before we go on to the next presentations. As you saw, this was basically rehabilitation component of the policy. Yes, please.
And we have a provision for in the state budget for purchasing land for those people who have lost their houses due to erosion. But then what happens, as we saw in presentation earlier, people do not want to relocate in far off places. As Dr. Shekhar also mentioned, that people don't want to lose, means they don't want to get replaced. So that is why we are facing a lot of reluctance from people. They want to live in almost the same location, and then after 4 or 5 years that land also will get erode. So what is the practical solution, or is there any thought regarding this with any of these states?
The question, I missed the last part,
Sir, people do not want to relocate to the safer places because their houses, their land, their farms, their relatives, their other friends are there only. But we purchase, as government is purchasing land wherever it is available. So when that land is offered to them, they do not want to go there, even if they take that land, but then do not go.
That is the perennial problem with relocation. You know, everywhere, every time it happens. There is nothing new. What we need to do, perhaps in this case, is that we ask the people to purchase the land. The government should not purchase the land. People should do that through they should use their own resources, or their own contact, their own network, and you say that this is the money that will be given. You organize the purchase, and you should and you should get whichever the land suits you the best. I think that would be a more feasible solution. And government purchasing the land, it's also not an easy thing to do. Government officers are also not keen to purchase the land. It opens them to many accusations and inquiries and all kinds of things. So, generally the government should not get into these things unless, you are going through this whole process of LARR Act, which is hugely time consuming. Best thing is to fix the rate and based on the local inquiry, and ask the people, you arrange, you organize, and we will pay.
Is there any state, sir, which has standardized the rates? Okay, we will then talk to them.
Yeah.
From this morning session, we had heard about rehabilitations, we have heard about displacements and relocation and all. Contrary to the question to sir, sir, I think we also need to include in this policy, we need to also include a committee so that to look into the, the matter the ma'am has already put up. There should be a committee for monitoring, because for an example I want to say in Assam there is this district called Dibrugarh, and the Dibrugarh district there is one particular village that's affected by flood and erosion both, and already government has given the land and they have purchased the land, and the people what they used to do, they during the during the monsoon season they used to go and leave the purchased land that given by the government, and after that during the winter season and the lean period the people used to go and stay in the same particular in their eroded places. So the thing is like they used to give the land, the house that they built in a rented. So those every year, what they used to do, every year they used to take assistance from the government. So we don't have that kind of a monitoring mechanism. So I think monitoring mechanism should be there in the policy to maintain this policy because this policy is a very holistic policy which includes all sort of things. So to do that, I think a monitoring mechanism committee should be there.
So there is a chapter on monitoring and evaluation, and I think there is a process through which the entire thing would be monitored. I don't know if there is a committee or not, I am not remembering, but there is definitely an agency that will monitor the whole thing. But the point that you have made is a valid point, and I think we will definitely consider that.
Concurrent
evaluation
and monitoring are a part of the policy document. So if you read through that, it is provided. It doesn't go ahead and say there is correct me if I am wrong. It doesn't say a committee, but says concurrent evaluation, monitoring is very important at all stages of the policy documents.
And in Assam also we have a policy on the rehabilitation policy for erosion affected families. We came up, but this policy, Assam policy is only talking about the assistance to the those eroded families, not talking about the holistic purpose. But this policy is a holistic one, which is the part of it. Thank you.
So I'll request Shri P.K. Abdul Karim. Yeah, please, if you can come. Just briefly introduce. And then.
My name is Abdul Karim. I am the economic advisor in Department of Land Resources. So today I will just give a brief overview of this right to fair compensation and transparency act. This is called this long one, right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation and Resettlement Act 2013. And this is also otherwise called as the Land Acquisition Act 2013. Yeah. So as discussed from the morning, the draft policy aims to minimize the climate and human-induced risks and maximize the adaptive capacity and to address socio-economic issues of the affected persons. So the idea is to bring the social and economic protection strategies. So one of the acts which has been administered by the Department of Land Resources is this act. So I would like to just give the highlights of this act so that all the stakeholders are aware about this thing, and this can be aligned to the policy. Now the draft policy is under discussion. So I think most of the points has been incorporated, but for the benefit of the audience, I'll just highlight this act. So this act lays down procedure for providing compensation, rehabilitation and resettlement to all affected persons in that areas, especially, it includes all sectors. The act has the provision to provide for compensation to those whose land is taken away, bringing transparency in the process. It has relevance to the disaster management, especially in the coastal areas. So this act is actually a transparent, consultative and participatory approach in comparison to the previous, the Land Acquisition Act of 1894, which was enacted during the British rule. The act did not have any provision to address grievances or settlements. Moreover, it was a top-down approach for it. Under this, the urgency clause of this act, namely the projects vital to national security, defense of India, and natural calamities, the whole process of rehabilitation and resettlement is an integral part and must be completed on 18 months of displacement. That's a provision. And displacement is allowed only after providing compensation and completion of all formalities. The Act provides for rehabilitation and resettlement for displaced people, not only for the displaced people, but also for people affected by the project who lost their livelihood in affected areas. As per Section 3, the following categories qualify the project affected families: losser of the land, losser of primary source of livelihood dependent on land, losser of primary source of livelihood dependent on forest, water bodies and urban land. The Act stipulates conditions for rehabilitations and resettlement. It includes appointment of an administrator or a commissioner, a survey and census of project affected families, preparation of draft R&R schemes, rehabilitation, publicity in the locality, discussion in the local bodies, the PRIs, the public hearing, the review by the collector, the approval by the commissioner, and approved the scheme should be published. So this is the nutshell. I'm just trying to say that these are the provisions of the Act which has been more or less aligned in the draft which I have seen. So the process in the chapter 5, you have described the various process, and it is almost to say the various process have been described that also have a approach. So this is in a way aligned to the Act, So this Act can be finalized, this keeping in view this Act. So this is all I want to.
Thank you. Can I just say something? So LARR Act, and this is a historic act, and it has been framed by the government of India to give justice to their loss of assets and livelihoods when they are displaced by projects. The focus here is on projects generally, correct me if I am wrong. And here we are dealing with a totally different set of processes. I mean, of course, LRR Act makes a reference to disasters as well. But if we follow the process of the LRR Act, then the time that is taken is very, very long. And it's quite a bureaucratic procedure where you have to prepare the plan and then get the approval of the collector, commissioner and all that. It is still a very useful thing to quote in the policy, and I will request Eklavya to take note of this act, because in certain context this act can be invoked. But to the extent possible, we need to implement this policy in consultation with the people, in negotiation with the people, avoiding the legal framework of the LARR Act. The moment you start invoking the legal provisions, the time that is taken is prolongs considerably, increasing the people's distress. So that's the point. I hope but I would still say it's it provides a very important legal framework which we must acknowledge in the policy document.
Thank you. So the paucity of time, we will move to the next presenter, Mr. D. Sarangi, and maybe after that we can take a round of questions. Sorry, briefly introduce also.
Okay, no, I don't know. Good afternoon, everybody. I am D. Sarangi from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, dealing with national highways. I have been listening very intently from the morning. As far as our relationship with bridges, rivers, channels, etc. concerned, it's mostly the crossing. So in all national highways, we have bridges and culverts at very regular incidents. But occasionally we have also highways that run parallel to a channel or a river. Sometimes it may be very short, maybe for 100 meter, 200 meter, half kilometer, but sometimes it may be very, very long. A case may be NH10, the road going to Gangtok from Siliguri, which runs on the bank of river Tista, one side hill and one side river, and a very, very difficult situation to maintain the existing NH. So, as far as our responsibilities concern is to construct our bridge, including, say, its foundation, its protection works, and particularly protection works to the immediate approaches, so that it doesn't get vulnerable by the floods or erosion. That's the primary concern. But along with that also, we look into the protection of the river bank to a certain minimal extent, and particularly on the upstream side. We are not so much bothered about the downstream side, because focus is always to keep the bridge and its approaches safe. And as far as this river bank protection is concerned, our understanding is that it happens for multiple reasons in different kind of channels, topography wise, sediment wise. Sometimes it is the strong current which instantaneously cause washing out of a section. Sometimes it can be undermining and the toe is damaged. Sometimes it can be piping, not in the same scale as in Kerala, but the subsurface flow sometimes cause damage to the river embankment. And for these, what we usually do, like any other civil engineering structures, to have the surveys, investigations, which basic technical survey, and of course hydrological investigation, which constitute the major part. And based on that, we design our protection measures. As far as the river bank protection measures we follow or we adopt, basically are two types. And the most prominent and which we usually follow is the direct method. It's a kind of, say, stone pitching with a launching apron, or with concrete blocks or stone in the gabion were mesh. Those are the direct methods we usually follow in the immediate approaches to the bridge abutment. But in addition to that, in some critical cases, we also go for indirect methods like spurs or something like that. And in addition to guide the flow through the bridge, particularly in alluvial channels, sometimes we use guide bonds, which a kind of, say, embankment with a particular shape, with a particular cross-sectional configuration running on both upstream and downstream of the bridge. Now that's what, in a nutshell, I'll not take more time, what we do as far as highways, wherever there is interference with the channels and rivers. As far as this policy is concerned, I have one or two small points. So many things have been talked about. The first one, wherever the structural interventions are required, there should be a very, very good or sound detailed project report. In absence of that, there is every possibility, because in bridge, what we have seen, the components of bridge like superstructure, substructure, these are all mechanical design. We know loads or actions, we know material characteristics and the resistance models, and any software and manual calculation can do. But in respect of the foundation, in respect of the floor protection works, what we normally see between two designers, the approach, the treatment many times vary. There have been instances in the past, even after proper hydrological design, there has been addition to spans in a bridge. So that's the kind of situations or our experience. So based on that, I would suggest there should be a very sound project report, and how that project report can be sound. So for that, a kind of SOP should be there in the policy. That's one thing. Second thing, even we approach, because the policy targets to approach rehabilitation and mitigation together. And in all likelihood, these are to be relatively small size projects. But as far as mitigation is concerned, a small pocket should not be looked in isolated manner, as some speaker was telling that if there is, you find a solution at one place, it may create problem in adjoining place. So even if we are providing solution to a localized pocket, the situation on either side of that in continuation should be examined to avoid any problem in the adjoining stretches. These are my few. And in addition to that, I would suggest if there can be to the policy a kind of one or two annexures where all kind of reports from different central government agencies, some kind of good practices that have been followed in different states, those examples can be annexed
Now many things are available in the short form. The entire thing may not be reproduced, but those website references or some kind of thing, if that can be annexed to the policy, it may probably be helpful to the people in the district level or state level to better prepare their report. Thank you.
Thank you. So, a very important point that Mr. Sarangi talked about, when we talk about fluvial system, hydrological system, we all talk about interconnectivity. We go to the level of talking about river basin scale action. So nothing, we should not look into localized, but we should look at the larger. What would be the appropriate scale is a point of, always a point of discussion. But we will leave the floor open because the last session, which was on mitigation on riverbank erosion, and this one we talked about rehabilitation in the context of riverbank erosion. And we have representation from various states here. So I would request people from, representatives from various states, I know UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Assam, they are represented here. And a lot of these issues essentially manifest in extreme form in the Ganga Brahmaputra basin. Of course, they do it on the peninsular rivers also, but they manifest a lot in the Ganga Brahmaputra basin. And in this context, it would be really good if we would like to know from the states if they have, our friends from Bihar, if you would have any particular comments on these two sections before we move ahead to the next. Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
This is with regard to the right to fair compensation and rehabilitation and resettlement. That's
Sir, Mike.
2013 Act. So that Act is exclusively for the project affected families, not for the disaster affected families. Our member MDMA says that the legal framework has to be taken into account while framing the guidelines for the disaster affected families, for the resettlement and rehabilitation of disaster affected families. In the case of disaster, most of the presentation tells about the resettlement. It should be there where they live. That is the question. So, in what cases the legal framework of 2013 Act can be applicable to the our disaster affected families? So that is the question.
Yeah. So to add on to that, maybe this is for Mr. Karim. So to add on to this, you may find in various states that people who are actually affected by riverbank erosion or coastal erosion might not have the land ownership on the land where they are staying. So in such cases, what does the LARR kind of provisions would also be interesting.
So in that case, my point is that we should have a social mapping, some assessment done by the authorities, So on that basis, we can suggest, compensation. I think the compensation.
No, but what does the LARR 2013 actually talk about? Does it take into consideration
it is basically on projects, basically on land acquisition.
Yeah, but you may come across in this case, we are talking about what today Dr. Vatsa was talking about, environmental refugees or climate refugees who are moving out displaced because of a disaster, because of erosion, or because of coastal erosion. So in such cases, and you find that the person does not have or the family does not have the land ownership. In such case, what would LARR provisions for?
But there are some provisions in that act,
The previous presentation, first ensuring the ownership of the land. That is the question. How we can ensure? Because most of the disaster affected families are not owning the land in which they are living.
So I understand your point. The point is that, in this case, who is the loser of the livelihood? He is also entitled for compensation under the act, So that can be provided under this act, that's the
Yeah. I think livelihood compensation is also something that this policy talks about. Yeah. So any other questions? Otherwise we will, please.
Like we are talking about compensations, and we are also focusing on the, like for example in Assam we are focusing on giving the assistance to the those affected families. I think this policy also need to categorize the selections of the beneficiaries. There should be a categorized like whom, for example, the family rendered landless and or homeless or due to river erosions, and the families rendered homeless, only homeless, and also the family who left the both the homeless and the agricultural land. So I think the category should be there for the selection of the beneficiaries. And also when we talk about rehabilitation as a temporary basis, I think rehabilitations of the displaced person with the all government entitlements, especially focusing on the women and especially to the adolescent girls, should need to be incorporated. I think already had been incorporated, but we have to also look into the governmental entitlement for the for the displaced persons. Thank you.
Thank you. Eklavya, would you like to comment? Yeah.
I think both the suggestions are already there in the policy. To begin with, when we are talking about entitlements for the weaker sections and women and adolescent girls, it has been iterated a number of times, and wherever we are talking about selection of beneficiaries, we are looking, I mean, it is not about prioritizing, as you said, that we need to categorize, but we have just looked at who are the people who have been displaced. But then your suggestion is we'll see agriculture and
yes, because so it should not create any dispute between the beneficiaries, because in Assam we face lot of problems due to this. So this should be a state specific kind of interventions to the policies.
so it's basically about homestead land and
Both the agriculture. Yes.
Any further question? Yeah, then we will end this session. This particular component of resettlement, rehabilitation, is a very important additionality that this national policy brings in. I remember a few years back when a student of mine and myself, we were doing an analysis of what has been the losses due to riverbank erosion as faced by the erosion affected family, and we typically wanted to follow the classical approach of what was the situation earlier and what is the situation now, or what we call as pre-post analysis. We were confounded by the fact that a family is displaced 15 times in last 12 years. So what is the pre? Is it the last? Is it the last but last? Is it the last but last? So what is the pre? So that becomes a very important and a very big challenge often when we try to talk about displacement and rehabilitation, particularly in this kind of displacements where essentially people are forced to move because of a disaster. They immediately go to a proximate area which further again erodes, and the process continues. And with every such process, people start getting poorer and poorer. Hopefully this new policy will, with this additionality and all of your support in the rolling out of this policy, perhaps this historical, in that sense, an injustice that has been happening with the most marginal section of the population will be addressed. Thank you. We'll end the session and maybe we'll go on for the next.
Lastly, I just want to make a point to the technical team here from the various institute. Like, can we have a UAV mapping study? I think we can more technical person can say about that. Like UAV studying of the UAV mapping of the embankment to know the health of the embankment, because in Assam we have lot of embankments, so we also need to monitor the embankment system and the health of the embankment, so that we can get a proper project behind it. So I think UAV mapping for the embankment is an important study for for monitoring the things. Thank you.
Thank you, Anandol. So once again, that was an amazing and beautiful session. And we are moving on to the sixth and final session of this day, process of planning and formulating mitigation and rehabilitation plan. So we'll start with the components of mitigation and rehabilitation plan, requesting Sri Eklavya Prasad, Councillor UNICEF, to proceed. Sir, please. Over to you, sir.
Sixth. So my last presentation or the sharing would be very different than what I have been doing for last four presentation of mine. It's basically about the whole planning process. I mean, what exactly is the policy suggesting? And definitely there will be certain differences when we're talking about two different erosion. One is river and the other is coastal. But I'm trying to give you a framework to understand as to how the planning is going to happen or what the policy per se has started. So this time I won't rush through. I'll go one by one to all the blocks so that things are clear. So as we said that with regard, the difference between coastal erosion and river erosion is basically the amount of knowledge which we have about the status. And it's good to see so much studies have been done as far as coastal erosion is concerned, or even the coastline. But when we look at river erosion or the river banks or the ways in which rivers have been managed, we do not have that kind of an information which is required by the policy. So it is important that we start, mapping the potential areas and the impact of changing climate and human-induced interventions on coastal and river erosion. So kind of a start, that's how we start. We go to basically the other phase of the planning is basically by creating a database of diverse challenges confronted by communities affected and vulnerable to coastal and river erosion. There are places where there are states where it must have already happened, but there are states where we're still at a very infant stage, and there are states where there is not much of thought gone into it. So basically saying that, before we even think of developing a plan, these are steps that we must take in order to successfully plan an intervention and develop a plan accordingly. Then it's about, someone was mentioning today, I think so, the gentleman who came from the Panchayati Raj Ministry, he was talking how important Panchayat is, and in our process, PRIs are extremely critical, and this is where, in the processes it has been ensured that PRIs do tend to become an important part of the entire assessment and implementation process. Then I remember this very clearly when the first draft was reviewed. One of the suggestions that came into us was with regard to assessments of the coastal and river erosion affected area, and there was this suggestion of why don't we have a kind of a convergence where we have a research institution, we have an academic institute, we also have people from the panchayats, we also have the affected people, all coming together and looking at the whole issue of the river and the coastal erosion, respectively. Now, I thought that was very good, and when we discussed about it, it was a good kind of a part of planning, because it brings in difference of perception, and which is shared and gets reflected in the work that we are planning to do, or a project that we are planning to develop. Again, re-emphasizing the fact that the policy has given a lot of importance to panchayats, and therefore it is a panchayat-centric approach, both for implementing the mitigation and the rehabilitation, with regard to the social, cultural and economic needs of the affected and the vulnerable communities. And this is kind of a soul of the entire the policy, where we are looking at extremely decentralized unit of implementation, recognition in terms of how the plan has, or how the problem has panned out at the panchayat level, and therefore the emphasis on why DDMAs need to be far more stronger. We have talked about professionals being there in the DDMAs who would help the district to monitor and also to implement this whole program. Now, I think so. There are mentions in the policy about convergence of centrally sponsored schemes and state-sponsored scheme. And today a lot of it was talked by Vatsa Saab in the morning, where he was basically showing us different avenues for the funds to be brought in. There is a mention about different sources in the policy from where we can actually get help in order to meet our requirements, financial requirements. And last but not the least, it's about relocation of both temporary and permanent displacement has to be planned in consultation with the local affected and vulnerable communities. So again, this whole aspect of how do we ensure that the communities who are either who have confronted erosion, or who are confronting erosion on a continuous basis, they are involved in shaping the entire mitigation and rehabilitation plan. Thank you.
Waiting sadly for your presence.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Now may I request Sri K.S. Vatsa, the member of NDMA, to have a talk on the preparation of mitigation and rehabilitation plan. So please, out to you.
So we had a day-long discussion on various aspects of the policy. See, when we develop a policy, the content of the policy is as important as the process. I can very well sit at the desk and write the policy based on review of the primary and secondary literature, and it won't be very different from what Eklavya has written. But that's not how the policy is written. Policy, when we write the policy, we do the research, we do the consultations, we do the ground truthing, and we have emphasized this process very much in developing this policy. So it had been a long process, it had taken more than a year to reach where we are today, starting with the concept note, setting up a working group, expert group, having several consultations in the beginning, and then we thought that we should go to the communities. And so we organized the consultations with the communities in 8 states. So, and we were very lucky to get the assistance of 8 committed NGOs. Some of them are here, and they conducted the consultations for us. We have all the findings of the consultations with us, and the policy draws upon those findings. So this policy is very much based on what we have found at the grassroots level. It reflects that. Maybe we do not have the local details there. It cannot be when you draft a policy, you abstract the general points, and that we are presenting here. But I can assure you that whatever we have included in the policy, it's very much based on what we have found at the community level. And then that's also not sufficient. We need to also consult with the states. We need to review the policy. It has gone through several rounds of reviews, and then finally the consultation with the states. That has happened remotely. But now we also thought that it's better to meet you in person and get your feedback and response. So we have traveled a long way, and we have reached here. I think it has been a great journey. It may still not be a perfect policy because a policy always evolves. We recognize that. So as we implement more and more projects, we learn more and we develop the policy better. What is very, very important is that we need to start implementing it forthwith, 1. 2, that we identify certain technical resources, certain institutional resources which work with the policy all the time, and we make a difference to the lives of the people. That's the most important thing. The proof of pudding lies in eating. So if the policy is not able to make a difference on the ground, then it's not a great policy. So I request all of you to participate very strongly in the implementation of this policy. We are seeking to reinforce the hands of the SDMAs and DDMAs. I'm so glad Assam took the lead in developing this policy, but we are not superseding the Assam policy with this policy. Both the policies need to be read in conjunction, and they need to support each other, reinforce each other, so that wherever we think we have a better way of serving people and making a difference to the lives of people, we do that, we follow that. And that is why I said LARR Act is very, very important, because wherever we think that LARR Act would be helpful to us, we should invoke the provisions of the LARR Act. Panchayati Raj institutions extremely, extremely important, and I see that they have to play a very important role. All the RD schemes, rural development schemes, MNREGS, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, all of them would play a very, very important role. So convergence is the essence of the policy, and we need to go beyond the resources that are available through the 15th Finance Commission. We need to be ambitious about it, and all the states, we are requesting all the states, this is a great opportunity for us to address all the issues that have been outstanding for a very, very long time. So let's be more proactive in developing programs, projects, and if you need our support, our assistance, more technical assistance in terms of developing the programs, projects, please let us know, and we would be happy to help you in every way possible. So thank you very much. I just want to thank each of you personally and on behalf of the NDMA that you have come here and you have made this workshop very, very successful, very participatory. We have got response and feedback on many aspects, and we hope that we will be able to finalize the policy very soon, and we will start rolling it out for implementation also as soon as possible. Thank you again, and I again thank Kerala State Disaster Management Authority. I can't be grateful enough. You have done a wonderful job in organizing this workshop and bringing us together. It just speaks of the progressive spirit of the KSDMA, and may you always be like this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for that beautiful talk. Now may I request Sri Kunal Satyarthi, the advisor of NDMA, to come forward to the dais and to give the summary of discussion and also talk about the way forward. Sir, please.
So just before the vote of thanks, and I'm supposed to be talking about summary of the discussions whole day and way forward. So the most difficult job. I think I should have done the vote of thanks, Jenna. So I have taken, just to be candid enough, I have taken notes of all that has been discussed. So we have, between us, made sure that whatever you have added today, all these speakers, we have taken a note of that, and we would be improving that as we go ahead. But hats off to Eklavya. I was just recollecting the whole day before walking to the dais, and marrying coastal and river erosion together in a document. You've done so many marriages in this document, right? Unlike marriages, coastal and river erosion talking together, and the diversity of river erosion already in the country, and eastern coast and western coast going different ways. You also tried to marry mitigation with resettlement. Amazing job. I think these are very, very complex phenomena, as I realized today. And Vatsasa, I'd like to add that the word in the finance convention recommendation says resettlement. But you have been saying today resettlement is the last option. Rehabilitation and in situ rehabilitation has to be the first. But the document stops short of that. So I think when we started the day from the same dais, we all realized that we are not transgressing into the domain of flood department or irrigation department or forest department. Everybody feels threatened by mangroves and embankments and all that because they're feudal landlords of their own areas and expertise. But we are not kind of transgressing into anybody's areas. But this is clearly a very important slow onset, soft killer, silent killer that has been there. And I was recollecting Eklavya's statement that 2005 में जब वो embankment में खड़े होके सोचा था तो आज वो पूरा हो रहा है. I think it's very important to realize this is a very silent killer. It's not as dramatic as it doesn't appear in the press like Morbi Bridge or a landslide or Joshimath. It is very silent, but it is a very important disaster to capture. It is affecting people's lives, homes. People. I love the word Nirmala's presentation. The word called assetlessness. You're just deprived of your assets, deprived of land. Your land is gone, either it is washed away or it is full of silt. Your home is gone, where you used to live for generations together, and your livelihood is gone. So assetlessness is not a very common phenomenon in a lot of disasters. So it does happen in most, but not as this kind that you lose your own land on which you are supposed to be growing things. So that's very important to do. I think it is not flood. Normally people mix. Some of the learnings today, for me personally, and for the audience is, this document is not flood. We are not talking about flood for sure. So that distinction is very important to realize. This is always there. Soil erosion of both kinds, coastal and river erosion is always there. It's just happening around the clock. And it will aggravate because of climate change. Your glaciers will melt. I come from mountains. Glaciers will melt and they will lead to such, apart from the dams and barrages that Vasasa was talking about, I think I've seen the mountain rivers, they are all ferocious right now. They're just melting. They can't take so much water as they're supposed to be taking forward. So this problem in mountains will be happy because they have very deep gorges and valleys. They will survive. When the river comes out at Haridwar or Rishikesh and other places, the problem will start from that point of time. I think this document or this initiative prepares us for those bad days that are certainly going to come. So I think from that perspective, also from the rising sea level, I started in the morning and told we don't feel that pinch. And somebody was saying 100 square kilometer, and I was worried because I'm a forester by training. And I lost 99 square kilometers in the Sundarbans. And the project director in Sundarban, I don't know whether he's aware about or not aware, but this is a silent killer. What can be more silent than losing the tiger reserve, the most prestigious Royal Bengal Tiger Reserve, Sundarbans? 100 square kilometers is just gone, and nobody knows about that. So I think that is very important to recollect. I also like the long emphasis, sir, particularly led by you, on how in situ rehabilitation is different from ex situ rehabilitation, and how resettlement is the last option but might be option, and capturing all that. And the document captures all that. I read it in the flight again yesterday. So that's important. The two presentations by NCCR and NCSCM were very, very revealing. I think they have a lot of potential, including NRSC. So if all these three institutions together could start looking at this problem from the angle that has been portrayed today in this hall, I think we'll be making a lot of sense. I was talking to Vatsa Sahab lightly and saying, satellite wale ko nadi nahi samajh mein aati aur nadi wale ko satellite nahi samajh mein aata. So that is a very difficult problem. I'm very simple in assumption. So, when I am a satellite guy, when I am a forester, I just love my forest and my tigers. That's my job. But the important thing is to understand, when the satellite people start looking at rivers as an entity and look at what happened to the river before and what happens to the river tomorrow, I think we'll start making a lot of sense of this science that we have. There's a lot of potential. I remember there was a talk on the lines and the beautiful work. Both the institutions are doing amazing work. I think we should acknowledge that they're doing great work, but they could feed into this policy document and help the states concerned when they start implementing this policy. And the states today would be realizing that there are institutions which know where the problem is and where the land is. And Hussain Saab's presentation about Ganga mein kahan pe dikkat hai, where is the problems. So I think there are people working on all across. I don't need to repeat all that, but also that there is a policy document which you have read through today, which would be improved. As we have discussed today, every point would be improved. I'll request Eklavya to spend some more sleepless nights and improve this very quickly and give it back to me, incorporating whatever has been discussed today. That has made all of us wiser. But there is a funding arrangement. I again borrow from intervention ideas. A lot of policies. I've seen environmental policy and forest policy lying on the shelf. 30% land in the plains should be forest and 60% land in the mountains should be forest. But how do you achieve that? There's no money for that. There's hardly any money available to achieve those kind of targets. But here there is a prescriptive amount of 2500 crore. It might be less. Some people were skeptical. For Kerala, you require 750 crores and all that. But it's a good point to start. We don't want to solve all the problem at the same time, but you can take up some model areas, whether you take the grey waste area. Somebody was talking about 3 categories of problem, and you start treating the third, then you have to go with civil work only. So then you require a surgical operation and allopathy drugs, and you can't survive only on homeopathy and naturopathy. So if you can choose wisely in your own state about what kind of problems, or a mix of 3 varieties, and treat them with the money that is available right now. So I think that is very important to take home. We are not submitting, we are not prescribing any templates and norms. And that is very difficult for implementer, because the moment you have norms and template, you fill up that template and norm. So, right, that is what happened to the disaster management plans in the country. Template, tick box, Bardo, plan, ban gaya district ka. But those don't work. So I think it is very localized. I was having this discussion with Vatsa Sahab in the morning table. Norms nahi hai, template nahi hai, state kaise banayega program and all that. But I think it makes a lot of sense to understand that the problem is very localized. We are not trying to treat the whole problem by 2500 crore rupees in this program, but you can test models. You can test models in your state, 4 models, 5 models, take up 1 valley, take up 1 panchayat, take up 10 panchayats, and try to implement a model which looks at science, looks at local problems, look at local solution. You can borrow from, there's no standalone prescription that we can give for that. So that's a good learning. I think since the problem is localized, you can make mitigation programs or resettlement or rehabilitation programs localized, make a cocktail of both of them together if required. Half from NDMF, I don't know how the mechanism would be, because there are 2 different funds. FA is not here right now. We'll have to make 2 subsets of the program and stitch them together, one for mitigation, one for resettlement from NDRF and NDMF, and fund both of them together. So importance of Panchayati Raj institutions and DDMA being the focal point, not SDMS, is also very important to understand. So
Just to repeat, at the cost of expense of repeating a brief of what has happened in the day, I think I thank all the Government of India colleagues who flew and talked about land resources, talked about, Shivani is missing here, talked about power. She was always worried about transmission lines and powers, what happened to power supply and Panchayati Raj and the road department has been present here. So I think it has been a very engrossing day, quite a learning experience for me personally. And the emphasis again on non-structural measures and measures that work in the field is very important to realize. Two things at the end. I think that I did in the day before yesterday. I was in IIT Bombay 2 days. So I tell it again now. Let's convert the WhatsApp group, which has flight details and when are you arriving and what food do you like and where the ice-breaking session will happen. Let's keep this WhatsApp group alive as a group on river and coastal erosion. So I think that is my first logistics submission to the admin. I don't know who the admin of the group is. Must be Shekhar. So you have to, yeah. So you can convert that group now onwards after you have seen everybody off from Kerala, whether they go on Sunday or Saturday. When they've taken the last flight, convert the group into a group on river erosion and coastal erosion, and we can keep sharing information, documents, revised policy documents on that WhatsApp group. So let's use WhatsApp more for, I don't know how people used to organize meetings before WhatsApp was invented. पता नहीं तब कैसे करते होंगे workshop, मुझे तो पता नहीं चलता है. So but now it's very convenient. So please do that. Eklavya, when you give us the last document, we'll put it on the website. For all the email addresses that we have gathered today, we'll circulate that document again. With a very limited time, not 1 year or 6 months to reply. I'm requesting Eklavya to do it in 3 days or 5 days, not more than that, Eklavya, and then we'll take comments for 3 more days. And then we finalize the document, send it to the Ministry of Home Affairs for formal notification if they so desire. That is my submission. I think I'll end at that, and before Jana gives a vote of thanks and encroaching into his territory, eroding his territory, I thank all the colleagues from the Kerala SDMA for hosting us here. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have come to the conclusion of this workshop and all these beautiful sessions. Now may I request Dr. S.K. Jana, Joint Advisor of NDMA, to come forward to the dais and propose a vote of thanks. Sir, please.
So now a day-long presentation and specifically on national workshop is going to close, and this will be specifically after vote of thanks. So in this context, it is my privilege to vote of thanks in the closing ceremony of this workshop. First and foremost, I express my gratitude to Dr. B.P. Jai, Chief Secretary and CEO of KSDMA, and KS Basta, members of NDMA, Dr. A. Jayatilak, Additional Chief Secretary and Convener of KSDMA, and Sri Kunal Satyathi, Advisor NDMA. So the inaugural address highlighted the problem and importance of erosion. While doing such exercise, we may not forget about the political economy of the people, social and psychological well-being of the affected, and state-specific scenarios and solutions thereof. Actions requires the process of dynamism, global versus local. This may not be seen as separate, rather it provokes us to adopt middle-range approach, which has been clearly distinguished in the sessions, that is, think globally and act locally. I also express my sincere thanks to Chair and co-chair of the sessions of the workshop and speakers of her sessions. The focus was on rationale of policy, mitigation measures, rehabilitation measures, and with reference to coastal erosion and river erosion. The state government of Kerala has already been notified this as a disaster, and the state government of Assam has also issued the policy in this context. So while doing such policy at the national level, so we may not forget about that the policy or act or whatever in the political domain or LARR Act 2013. So we have to keep in mind, and we have to consider the things whether it is convergent or divergent as per the requirement in the context of Finance Commission's recommendation 2021 to 25-26. So the dynamism comes into the picture again that Dr. Sekhar has mentioned about the soil piping, whether it has been today, it may not be considered as one of the may not be considered as the erosion in either coastal or land, river erosion, but nobody knows and the cause still it is under process, the consequences is there. So tomorrow it may be, or tomorrow the Finance Commission may give some other recommendations which will include the issue of soil piping into this financing windows in other form also. Also, thanks to official and states, UTs and ministries departments to participate in the workshop. Their valuable inputs and suggestions deliberated in the workshop will be placed as record and definitely considered in finalizing the policy document. The national workshop is specifically that Joint Secretary NDMA has already mentioned, also member NDMA has already mentioned that the process has taken into almost 1 year, and this is national workshop was conducted in keeping in mind that this will be the final deliberations, and that will give the momentum to freeze the national policy and to submit the Government of India for approval. Once this is approved, so this will be circulated to all the states and UTs for implementation. So in this context, it is once again requested that all states and UTs and all the stakeholders to provide their final comments or suggestions or inputs within 1 week, so that we'll be able to incorporate all these relevant suggestions and put forth to the approval of the competent ministry. So lastly, I express my sincere thanks to Dr. Sekhar and his team for organizing this workshop, and it is so swift and organized manner that everybody expressed their satisfaction. Also, officers of state government, support staff and media deserved appreciation for their valuable contributions. Last but not the least, I would also thank to Sri Kunal Satyarthi, Advisor NDMA, for his support and guidance. Also, I place the record of thanks to NDMA for their continuous support in organizing this workshop. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have come to the conclusion of this event. Before winding up and before dispersing, we do have Dr. Vinay Bansal all the way from Punjab here, and he would like to do a special performance based on this conference. Let's put our hands together to welcome Dr. Vinay to the stage. He's going to recite a poem about this conference, so please.
गुड इवनिंग, आई एम डॉक्टर विनय बंसल फ्रॉम पंजाब। तो सबसे पहले मैं एनडीएमए का और असम का केरला का धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगा कि उन्होंने बड़ा अच्छा ऑर्गेनाइज किया इस इवेंट को, और डिलीशियस फूड के लिए और बिहाइंड द सीन्स जो काम कर रहे हैं। तो आई थिंक आपके ने पता नहीं सबने नोट किया या नहीं किया, वो जो बिल्कुल साइड स्क्रीन पे थैंक यू लिखा हुआ आ रहा है और साथ साथ में जैसे हम बोल रहे थे वो साथ साथ में वर्ड आर्ट बनाई जा रही थी। तो मैंने जाके देखा पीछे लोग बड़ा अच्छा काम वो साथ ही साथ जैसे हम बोलते हैं वो वैसे की वैसे डिजाइन कर रहे थे। तो बहुत ही अच्छा, आई डोंट नो कि कितने लोग बिहाइंड द सीन्स काम कर रहे थे इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को इतना अच्छा इस इवेंट को ऑर्गेनाइज करने के लिए। तो मैं सबको थैंक्स करना चाहूंगा। और एक छोटी सी पोइम मैंने लिखी है, हिंदी में है, द पोइम इज इन हिंदी बट यू वुड लाइक इट। अक्सर पहले जो बीच शब्द है, बीच, तो केरला इज फेमस फॉर बीच एंड बीच इज ए वर्ड इन इंग्लिश ऑल्सो एंड इन हिंदी ऑल्सो। तो वहीं से मेरी पॉइंट स्टार्ट होती है। अक्सर बाहर से लोग बीच पे घूमने आते हैं अक्सर बाहर से लोग बीच पे घूमने आते हैं, मगर यहां के लोगों को फ्लड्स के बीच में ही छोड़ जाते हैं। सागर की उठती लहरों को कब किसी ने रोका है? सागर की उठती लहरों को कब किसी ने रोका है? मगर एनडीएमए की नई पॉलिसी राहत की हवा का एक जोखा है। वो हवा जो जख्मों पे मरहम सा लगाती है, टूटे हुए दिलों में एक सरगम सा सजाती है। लास्ट लाइन आर, सुनामी को हमने रोक लिया, अब रिवर इरोजन और पाइपिंग को भी बता देंगे। सुनामी को हमने रोक लिया, अब रिवर इरोजन और पाइपिंग को भी हम बता देंगे। एनडीएमए और एसडीएम मिलकर हर बिखरे सपने को फिर से सजा देंगे। थैंक यू सो मच। थैंक यू।
Indeed, a beautiful poem. Put our hands together once again. Thank you so much, sir. Now, may I request everyone to stand for the national anthem, please.
शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तव जय गाथा, जन गण मंगल